Hello everybody, I'm RB103 and today I'm going to tell you about a couple of ideas I have as to what we're going to be doing moving forward. Now they're in no particular order of preference, so we'll just start at the beginning. So the first one is making a game. Essentially I've spent quite a long time designing a game over the past few years. I've gone into actual mechanics. I've built little kind of demos demonstrating some of the mechanics and how they work. The idea is that it'd be a very story-driven game, not relying heavily on visuals. I'm not too into doing the computer graphics, I'll be honest. So kind of simplistic graphics, a relatively difficult kind of actual game, some quite difficult to master mechanics, which hopefully should be quite enjoyable. I feel like I quite like to do this one because it gives me some kind of creativity and artistic ability, or like the ability to do artistic stuff. I think it'd be quite fun to do. I think there's quite a lot of interesting aspects to making a game, and I've spent a good many years reading about kind of game development and following the kind of game development circles. Now the thing is, with making a game, there's quite a lot of indie games coming out, with Steam having its green light and kind of Humble Bundle and stuff like this. There's a lot of indie games available on the market. Whether we'd actually make any impact into that would be a kind of one to see. I think the project as a whole would be quite fun to do. There might be quite a few difficulties in actually coding it, but as I said, I've kind of made a couple of demos and experimented with a couple of the mechanics, and I think it would end up in quite a nice result, with an interesting story, interesting setting, and interesting challenges. So that's kind of the first one, more software orientated. The first couple are software orientated. So the next one will be CAM software, and that is computer-aided manufacturing, essentially software for programming CNC machines. Now I've actually made software to program CNC machines, profiling tubes, making kind of 2D profiles on a 3D surface, that kind of thing. I've reverse engineered quite a few different types of CAD software now, to the point where I can machine read and like programmatically produce the G code and other codes required for programming CAD machines. The next step in this respect would be to actually detect the output from the computer to the CNC machine itself. Now I can do that, and there's software available for detecting what actual information is being transferred through the serial port to the CAD machine, and I think I can get into there and reverse engineer it. CAM software is quite an interesting thing to design. Machine tools have lots of kind of complexity to them, and I think it would be a good learning experience. Also, it would help later on if I had my own factory. I could actually program the machine tools to do things that maybe they weren't originally programmed for, which is what I've done with the tube profiling software I've already written. Now, the good things about kind of me designing CAM software is it's kind of in a field that I already know. Not CAM software per se, but kind of computer-aided manufacture I've done a lot of, so I know quite a bit about it. The cons are kind of there's like quite a lot of competition. Each tooling manufacturer actually produces their own software, which I found most of them to be very limited in what you can do. Now ideally with this one, we'd quite like to actually get in with a tool manufacturer and kind of make our software the software that is released with the machine tool that we're programming for. Now that would be quite good and open a lot of possibilities to us. It would also be quite a lot of fun to do. Now the next one's kind of similar, in the same boat, and may actually tie into the CAM software, and that is engineering management software, which is kind of purchasing control systems and stuff like that, managing systems, and design process management and stuff like that. The idea would be to make a software for kind of automating as much of the paperwork as possible. Now, for me personally, I find paperwork a laborious task and rather boring. I don't like the large amount of paperwork I have to produce, and I think most other engineers would agree that they have to produce a significant amount of paperwork for what is actually required. I think a lot of it can be automated, and that comes into machine reading the drawings and the kind of CAD models that people have, loading that into either a database or some other file storage structure. Now with this, I've actually made part of an EMS or made aspects of it individually before. I made loads of different programs to essentially sort the mess of a file system that I've encountered previously, and stuff like that. I think it's quite an important thing to do. I think any economy in actual design time would be a great saving for a business. There are quite a few people who already make this software and similar software. However, I've found that using it in the past that can be quite clunky, quite difficult to use, have very unintuitive kind of UI. I think most of these types of software are designed for general industry, as in it'll count for any kind of manufacturing industry, whether you be making sheet metal or injection molding plastics. I mean, they're quite diverse pieces of software. My one would be more geared towards sheet metal manufacturing specific, because that's the industry I've kind of encountered. I feel there's a lot of stuff that is kind of relevant to sheet metal manufacture that is not so relevant to other industries, and vice versa. And we could simplify the kind of program quite significantly. I'd also like to allow for quite a lot of kind of manager control, because I find that with the current softwares that I have used, there's a lot more kind of user control, and things often get muddled up between different users, have different ways of naming stuff, for example, different ways of filing stuff and organizing stuff. So something like that I think would be good. There are already lots of competitors, and the problem is if you run this kind of software, you have to offer support for it, because if a factory is using this as its kind of primary engineering management software, then there's going to be quite a heavy requirement on support, because if that software fails, then that could cause quite a massive loss in production, which is obviously a bad thing. So there'll be quite a lot of support costs associated with that, call center and stuff like that. So that may not be one to look at, but it's an idea. The other one is just kind of a modular engineering calculator software, in which you condense quite a lot of my university notes and quite a lot of the equations I use on a day-to-day basis into a simple piece of software to allow you to calculate these things with very little effort. I mean, a lot of times in engineering you have to refer to a good deal of tables, lists of information, and it would be kind of collating this and putting it all together in a simple to use software package. Now I've already done stuff like this, and I've found loads of information with respect to thermal expansion, for example, and compacted this into a kind of calculator and table kind of piece of software, which has allowed me at work to look up relative expansion rates of materials very easily, find relatively similar expansion rates in other materials, and it can offer suggestions as to different materials you can use together. Say, for example, for mounting like a window to a frame, materials with similar thermal expansion coefficients would make the glass less likely to crack due to thermal expansion. Now there's quite a few other things, quite a few kind of industry-specific things I'd like to include in there: sheet metal calculators, bend allowance calculators, that kind of thing. Now they can be a bit fishy, but we would, or I would ideally like to get most of my material from actual engineering data, recording data, taking samples and stuff like that. I think that would be quite an easy one to do. I think it would be quite a niche market again. I feel that it would mainly be a benefit to students and people like kind of new in the industry. People who are more experienced in the industry probably have all this information in a folder, for example, is what I have, that I keep near my desk, and I look at it in it frequently whenever I need to find any information. Um, kind of more electronics projects, I've had ideas as to kind of large area security and surveillance, methods of surveilling large areas using kind of very cheap mass manufacturable devices. This would kind of predominantly be military application for this product, potentially civilian applications, mapping and so on and so forth. It's quite an interesting project. I like the amount of sensors, the kind of networking that you'd have to use with it. I imagine the military market's kind of a hard market to get in, hard to be recognised and stuff like that. So whether this would be a good idea would also involve buying some componentry that may be quite expensive sensors and stuff like that. But I'm quite happy to do that if this would be something I'd be willing to take going forwards. Another kind of electronics project is an ARM data display. Now this probably sounds weird. I quite like the idea of kind of human mountable computing and stuff like that. I know we all have one in the form of a mobile phone, and this may take the form of a kind of mounting system for a mobile phone, but it would have an inbuilt method of communicating with the aforementioned phone to give data that I want to display on the phone. And I would make an app that would correspond with this kind of ARM mount. This ARM mount is mainly a platform for other projects. I've got quite a few different electronics projects based around this. The main problem is I don't actually know if there'd be a market for kind of human wearable computing, as I call it, or the kind of data logging and monitoring like kind of biometric data and putting it to a phone. I'm sure there's stuff already out there. I'm pretty sure that I've got kind of a different take on it because I've looked at some of their stuff. With regards to this, I've kind of already played with LCD screen driving and had some kind of electronics projects related around that. That would be obviously with a kind of inbuilt embedded processing unit for a kind of LCD screen that's mounted rather than a phone. The phone would probably be connected via Bluetooth interface or near field communication or something like that. And this kind of corresponds with my next project, which is the kind of sensory augmentation. Now I've been interested in sensory augmentation for quite a while now, and as kind of part of that interest I've been designing multiple different kind of subsystems and different sensors and how they'd be communicated to the human body without kind of a visual interface or something. The connection with the previous project would be that you could display the data visually on the ARM-mounted display. Now, there's quite a few interesting ways of communicating data with the human body that are probably overlooked in many cases. I think kind of going away from the Google Glass kind of visual data representation to more like direct sensory input would be good. I think there's quite a few different exciting kind of things we can sense and play with in that respect. Whether you could kind of program yourself to receive that information without having to make a direct calculation between the sensor and the information coming in would be an interesting thing to experiment with and see what happens. Again, is there a market for this kind of thing? I'm not really sure. I think it would be a very interesting projects to kind of work on, and I'd be quite enthusiastic working on them, but again, we'll see. Another kind of small electronics project, or small-ish, probably not, is a child's electronics toy. Now, I've designed a child electronics toy that would hopefully encourage children of all ages to kind of prototype and play with electronics in a way that I haven't seen possible before. It would involve a child-safe kind of surrounding for an electronics kind of inside. It would consist of multiple components in this child-safe form that could connect together and communicate with each other, giving like direct output to the child playing with it, either in the form of like a sensor, not a sensor, like buzzer or a light or something like that, building simple circuitry, but in a way that's very non-lethal, doesn't involve any small fiddly parts, and is quite child safe, can be chewed on and stuff like that, thrown across the room. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. As I said, I'm not sure what ages would be interested in this. I think that would really depend on the kind of parent and what age you'd want to introduce your child to an electronics toy, for example. I think there's quite an interesting market. It's very difficult to get into. There's a lot of legislation with regards to child's toys. It would take a lot of reading and a lot of preparation in that respect, kind of selecting the correct materials and identifying kind of hazards associated with this toy. Now, going on to kind of more simplistic mechanical projects, things I could build and prototype in my own home with reasonable tooling. So the first one would be a stool, a simple stool, small flat pack designed for like easy carrying. What I've noticed most often in these kind of portable stool things is they generally tend to be very weak, rely a lot on fabrics. The fabrics tear, they're very uncomfortable, they're unstable, have a habit of falling over, all of which you don't really want from a nice comfortable camping stool or something like that. So this would be a very lightweight, very portable, kind of small sturdy design stool. It would be easy to build, very readily mass manufacturable, and quite a general, simple idea. I'm going for keep it simple, stupid, the golden rule of engineering here. The second one follows the same principles, keep it simple, stupid, and is the boot protector. Its main kind of purpose is protecting your boots, increasing their longevity. I found in military training a lot of people generally tend to wear two pairs of boots, one for the field, one for kind of dress and parade. One kept nice and shiny, one generally murky. This kind of would hopefully reduce that need for having multiple pairs of shoes, or reduce the need for polishing kind of field boots. I think it could be used in most industries that involve steel toe-capped or kind of protective footwear where the leather often gets worn out and stuff like that. Now there are a couple of these things on the market. I don't think they have a similar take to it or the same take to it as me. Whether that's enough, I'm not sure. They're quite easy to build. I can prototype them in my own house and they're readily manufacturable. The other kind of mechanical project is similar kind of as well. It's a leg kind of carry protector. I haven't thought of a name for it. And essentially I found a lot of the times whilst carrying heavy loads slung over one shoulder, I get severe chafing on my leg off the load swinging back and forth against the leg. That's especially if the load's kind of an awkward shape, has protruding parts and stuff like that. I've had it where it's worn through the skin before and caused bleeding on my leg. This would be a small fold-up thing that would just essentially cover the area and provide a low friction surface, so hopefully removing that kind of damage and chafing from carrying heavy loads in that way. The other kind of mechanical project is something I've kind of been doing for the past 2 years now, albeit quite poorly up until fairly recently, where I changed the way in which I was doing it, and that's silverworking. Now I've had quite an interest in silverworking because personally I quite like the idea of having a kind of craft skill. I've enjoyed the very difficult process of learning to work silver, and it's a very pleasurable material to work. Now up until now I've only really made kind of gifts for friends, that kind of thing. I haven't actually really considered doing it commercially. Whether that would take away kind of the fun, whether that would add a new kind of seriousness to it, I'm not entirely sure. I feel I've got a couple of interesting jewellery designs. There's quite a lot of things I want to play about with and experiment in the future, but whether I keep this to a hobby or actually use it as a business, I'm not sure. Ideally, if I was using it as a business, I'd be looking to get into the Guild of Master Craftsmen and associated with the British Jewellers Association, stuff like that, kind of get out there in the field. I think it's quite a hard market to get into because there's quite a lot of silver jewellery about, a lot of these mass manufactured silver jewelleries. I think you have to be incredibly skilled to kind of make a living as a crafter of bespoke kind of jewellery, as the kind of one-off handcrafted pieces. You've got to be able to get your name out there quite well. And at the moment I don't feel my kind of craftsmanship levels are really up to the commercial kind of standard. I could work on this and maybe schedule, kind of make a production roster or something that would enable me to kind of use mass production techniques on kind of the handcrafted silver working kind of thing. This would allow me to practice more rapidly, potentially waste a lot more material, which is a big kind of aspect to the kind of practicing jewellery making, is the wastage of material. I've also kind of experimented, dabbled very lightly in gem setting over the past couple of months. Not to great effect so far. I've set one gem and I managed to lose that kind of demo thing on my living room floor. I've cracked a couple of gems, which hasn't been fun. It would be something I'd be doing a lot more in the future, but I think more as a hobby, unless obviously I decide to move forward with the jewellery kind of silver working business. That's kind of quite a far out thing. So those are the kind of projects or things I'm thinking of running with at the moment. There are quite a few others. I think I counted 47 or 48 projects in total, and that was just from the notebooks I've looked through fairly recently or found fairly recently. I know for a fine fact I've lost a couple of notebooks, which I'm quite upset about over the years. But I think as I go forward I'll probably have more ideas to add to the list. That's just been a brief overview as to a couple of projects I'd quite like to go forward with. If you've enjoyed listening to them or would like to hear more, please comment and let me know, and maybe we can look towards working through one of these projects together, or even well, we'll see what happens. I might make a decision as to a project over the next week or so. I've got some personal things that are coming up that I need to kind of get out the way before I decide, so we've got time either way. So thank you very much for listening, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again sometime. Cheers, bye.